Hey guys, hope you're going well. Welcome back to another session with the Educated Consultant. Today we're going to cover frameworks. So I've been getting a lot of my students asking and a lot of other people messaging me in my inbox asking how can I actually create consistently good frameworks for all types of cases. So a lot of people are really confident with things like profitability or mergers and acquisition cases, but what they're not good at is having consistent strategy to build frameworks for any case they experience. So what we're going to cover today is how to create unique frameworks for any case that you're actually given, whether it be peer-to-peer with someone else, with a professional, or in your actual interviews, whether it's first round with an associate or associate consultant, or the final one with an actual partner, which is a decision round. So for the next sort of 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long this training takes, I'd just like you to turn your phone off, put it upside down, turn off your iPad, turn off your TV, close any other tabs on your computer or the TV in the background, and just focus, because these 5 or 10 minutes could change the way that you actually think about creating frameworks and therefore bring success to you in the future to help you land a consulting role. So right now, do you kind of feel like you're a little bit stuck or you're not be able to consistently create those frameworks, which is making you frustrated and tired and quite angry and annoyed in a way that it seems easy for everyone else, but you can't seem to get the hang of it? Well, hopefully by the end of this training, we can actually get you to the point where it seems like a breeze, it's really easy, and you have a predictable system they can put in place every single time you go through an interview. So the first misconception I just want to cover off and get rid of is that lots of people try to create frameworks or learn how to create frameworks on their own. They think it's a task that's best learned by themselves. But what I actually want to unbunk or debunk is to actually understand that creating frameworks or understanding how to create frameworks and solve case interviews is a team effort. You want to create this framework with the interviewer and with the person that you're doing an interview with, so that when you actually create it, it's specific to the case and specific to that person. The second thing that I want to talk about is that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to understand that you can build the best framework possible for any case if you have a system. So you don't need to be Albert Einstein. You don't need to understand everything, know about all types of businesses, every aspect of it, and be able to talk about every aspect of it. You just need to have a solid level of business acumen and be able to articulate your ideas consistently and concisely within that specific prompt. So now we've talked about that, let's jump into the frameworks. And I guess this is essentially my frameworks simplified. This is bare basic, and this is what you can build on off those foundations to actually improve your ability to case. So there's two types of real frameworks that you can actually go out building. The first is a driver tree, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. So let me just move this out of the way for a second. So this driver tree is essentially identifying the problem or the specific area that you're looking at building upon, and then identifying what are the specific areas beneath that you can actually branch out from. On the right-hand side is the conceptual framework. This is my favorite type of framework, and this is the framework that I suggest beginners start with, and then once they become more advanced, they can work on driver trees for the pure reason that it's more simple and it's more consistent in solving cases. So what you'll basically have is you will split your whole objective idea into 3 to 4 to 5 different buckets or ideas or main key areas within the case, and then you can identify the sub-points within each of those areas. So for example, if we're talking about a case, your concepts could be, the first concept could be understanding the financials of the company. The second concept could be understanding the environment the company works in. And thirdly, understanding any regulations or rules that the company is actually working within as well. So those could be 3 really broad categories. So that's, I guess, a little identification of what they could be. So now moving into the actual steps on how to build a framework. So building a framework should be a predictable process. It shouldn't be one that you're trying to guesstimate your way through every time you do it. You should have a predictable, step-by-step process that you can implement. And hopefully, this 3 to 4 step approach is one that you can implement yourself whenever you need. So the first step is to actually define the foundations. So the framework you build is going to be built around the objective of the case. Without first identifying or understanding completely what the objective you're trying to achieve is, you're not actually going to be able to create a specific framework that solves the problem you're trying to solve. So to achieve the objective, you must also understand what's the specific scope of the problem and what are some key factors that are influencing the business or the environment in which they're working in. So for example, if your objective is something around increasing profits, your scope could be something like company size, company geographic location. Then any other key factors could be rules or regulations or legal issues that the company has to work within. So once you've defined the foundations, your next step is to define the buckets or the areas that you want to look at within the case to solve or generate a recommendation or an answer. So these buckets are essentially the key areas you need to investigate into the business problem to work out how you're going to create a solution. So there's two types of problems that you could face. So one is to determine the root cause, and the second one is to generate a solution. So some cases you have both of these problems, and you have to generate a framework or a solution to determine the root cause and generate a solution, or you can be faced with a problem that you can only have to determine the root cause or only determine a solution for that problem. So we'll go into this later with a bit of an example, but just think about these are two things you're trying to solve. So your buckets should be either determining a root cause of an issue or generating a solution to an issue. That's all you have to think about. The next step would be actually identify what those buckets are. So just as a really brief example, I don't suggest you memorize buckets for case types, but I do suggest you memorize buckets to use within cases that you can pull and manipulate yourself. So really simply, some potential buckets that are commonly used are things like the company, the competition, the market in which the company is working within, the customers, any opportunity costs the company is facing, a potential exit or entry strategy, a general profitability bucket, the actual product or service that the company is providing, any risks, and then the last one is to actually make your own. So when you're actually going through the cases, it's important not to be rigid in the way that you generate them and be able to be flexible and be able to make your own buckets or ideas that are specific to that case and solving the issue. So once you've identified what your buckets are, so say you've picked 2 or 3 of these, and you now have to absorb the buckets. So within each of the buckets or the areas, what are the actual granular aspects to look into? Or what are the smaller aspects you have to look into? So when identifying those smaller aspects, you need to consider some things. So the first is, how does this actually lead me to my objective? How critical is this aspect to achieving that objective? And the other things you have to consider is that, say you have a hypothesis, if proven true, so what? So where does it actually lead you in terms of solving the case? But if proven otherwise or not true, how will that actually influence the framework, and where does it actually lead you to solving the case? So some other considerations that you should actually be aware of when you actually either defining the foundations, defining your buckets, or expanding your buckets is you have to be specific. You have to be really highly specific to that case. So do not memorize frameworks and put them into cases. What you should do is memorize buckets or key areas that you can actually identify that will be relevant to a certain problem. And when you come up with those problems, you can identify, okay, well, what were those buckets or ideas, and how can I actually put them into the case now? Secondly is the MECE concept. So you have to be mutually exclusive within your buckets, or between your buckets more so. And within those buckets, be collectively exhaustive so that you cover all the ideas that you think are necessary to cover while actually trying to solve that problem. The final one is just to be logical when you're actually solving the case. When you're going through your buckets, identify why it's a logical approach to look at this area first, then this area, and then this area. And that'll show the interviewer that you're considered clear and concise in the way that you can solve problems in real-world scenarios. So, going through an example now, hopefully I can sort of drive this home, and I guess I can drive how to create the framework. So, as an example, we're going to use your client is a National Logistics. A National Logistics is a large transportation and logistics company that delivers freight to all areas of North America. Over the last 5 years, the company has experienced rising costs due to increases in wages resulting from a shortage of truckers. The client is now looking to reduce the operational costs in the business. How would you advise the client? So that would be a sample prompt. Say, for example, we've asked all of our clarifying questions and we have time to now create the framework, create a plan on how we're going to solve this case. The first thing is to define the foundation. So in this specific case, we first have to define what's the objective. The objective of this case is to reduce our operational costs. So to actually achieve the reduction in operational costs, we must also understand that it's a national logistics company. So whatever we suggest the company does, it has to be implemented across the entire nation or the national. And depending on where it is, in this case it may be the USA, so it's quite a large geographic location and there'll be quite a large number of fleets. And any other key factors could be the rising costs due to ... So we want to understand what the rising costs are due to and how much they're going to increase and for how long they're expected to increase or stay at this rate. Next will be to define our buckets. So when we're defining our buckets, we want to understand that we're actually trying to achieve the reduction in operational costs. So to first work out the reduction in operational costs, the first thing I want to understand is a basic breakdown of my profitability. So the first two areas would be to look into revenues and costs, because from this I can identify, well, where are the costs increasing specifically, and where can we actually look at bringing them down, or conversely, if we can't actually necessarily bring them down, the other counterintuitive would be to actually look at increasing the revenues. Whilst this isn't the objective of the case, it's also a necessary thing or consideration to think about, because we can't always cut costs as much as we'd like to. So once we identify, okay, where can we cut the costs and where can we potentially increase the revenues, or have a good trade-off between the two of not cutting costs too much, the revenues don't drop by too much, what are the ways we can actually do it? What are the ways we can actually cut the costs? So in this scenario, I've decided that two areas we can look at are either innovation or investment. So we could either look at innovating to cut costs or look at investing to cut costs. And there could be a multitude of ways that we could do that. The last section will be to expand the buckets. So as previously stated, the first areas I want to look at is the profitability. So can we actually increase the prices of the revenues? What's the delivery mix like? And can we use potential double trailers per delivery? Instead of single trailers. So that would be a revenue side of things. The next is to look at the costs. So main fuel costs could be fuel, depreciation, overheads, outsourcing of labor, or the load per truck. So what are the specific areas that we can look at here? So in the fuel, so what are the actual fuel prices? Can we hedge the fuel prices so they're not fluctuating and we're not increasing the costs over time? Depreciation. So what's the depreciation lifespan of trucks, and how can we manipulate that to best offset our costs? The overhead. Can we reduce any admin staff, because maybe we're having a reduction in truckers, which is increasing wages, or can we reduce the number of admin staff that we actually need, and can we increase the workload of others without dramatically impacting the outcome of the company? Next is outsourcing. So can we look at potentially contracting labor, bringing people in from overseas? Like, what are the potential options around that? And then potentially, what's the load per truck? So how full are the loads per delivery, and how can we best manipulate that? So we can look at a cost breakdown and a revenue breakdown and work out where the costs are rising, why they're rising, and what we can do about it. And also on the other side, on the revenues, we want to make sure that they're not falling too much and that we can actually prioritize that mix of trucks. So then, say we've identified the actual reason that the costs are rising and potentially identified some reasons for it, then we can work out, okay, well, how do we actually go and implement those cost reductions? So the first is through investments. So some possible investments may include things like buying new fuel-efficient trucks, because I guess if we're more fuel-efficient, we can have a lower cost per litre and therefore save money over the long term. Secondly, we can add energy-saving technology to our trucks. For example, spoilers, speed limiters, drag-resistant wheels, etc. So all those kind of things that actually go through and reduce the amount we spend on each truck. The last thing could potentially is to purchase a low-cost litre transportation company. So for example, if a company is currently using, say, electric vehicles or electric trucks, we could actually go and, if we're a large logistics company, we can actually go and acquire that company and reduce the average cost per truck that we spend. The next area will be to innovate. So in the innovation section, you have the license to be really creative here, right? So we could potentially look at developing drone delivery capabilities. So for intra-city deliveries, we could look at drones and actually deliver them by drones. So that would obviously reduce the operational cost per litre of fuel, that aspect. And then we could also look at exploring autonomous trucks, right? So if it's autonomous trucks are down the path, so say Tesla's releasing an autonomous truck, or another automated companies is releasing an automated truck, how can we actually go about purchasing them? And what's the trade-off between that? So how much do we pay a worker or a trucker to actually work in the truck versus how much extra is going to cost us to buy the truck? So those things are the things we have to consider here. So the other area we could potentially look at is exploring other higher margin markets. So for example, we could actually look to transition more into like air freight, into shipping, into railways, and how can we actually manipulate that? So this is like a really long shot if it doesn't seem like it's feasible to continue the trucking business. But for the most part, we want to look at investing or innovating within our current market. So I guess that's like a full summary of sort of how you should create the frameworks. If you'd like to, obviously, keep following along for more. I'm going to break down some more cases, break down why they should happen, why they shouldn't happen. And yeah, so I hope you really enjoyed that. And if you have any questions about it, just chuck them down below in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.